Okay, well, let's jump in, and we're going to jump into our first segment here. We're going to talk about Taylor Swift a little bit. And there's no doubt she's probably like the biggest artist of our generation. I mean, we all kind of grew up with her. Her Aries tour grossed over $1 billion. This single tour, highest grossing tour of all time. 4.3 million tickets sold. And the thing I want to caveat up front with this conversation is that nothing we're saying is an attack against Taylor Swift, because I believe that Taylor Swift needs Jesus just like everybody else, right? And so nothing against the non-believer, but again, and in the audience that are non-believers, I want them to know Jesus, right? And so, but I do want to have a little bit of a conversation about, should Christians, believers, listen to Taylor Swift? And the reason why this is becoming a question is because you can listen to Eminem and you can go, oh man, what he talks about is so horrible, it's so much cussing and stuff. Christians should, well, Christian would be like, you can't listen to Eminem, but can you listen to Taylor Swift? A lot of Christians would say yes. But I would argue that a lot of Taylor Swift songs are just as bad, if not worse, in their subtlety than, gangster rap.
Well, the genre doesn't matter. That's one of the things we're learning. Yeah. And she is the biggest artist in the world, and she is extremely talented. Mm-hmm. Taylor Swift is extremely talented, and my hot take just on Taylor Swift is country Taylor Swift was the best version of Taylor Swift. But to get to your point, like her song "Cruel Summer" is about basically having casual sex with different people, knowing it's going to lead to heartbreak, but there's beauty in doing it the wrong way. So, I totally see this, because Taylor Swift is worshipped. Like, yes. we think about that in the sense that, like, there's the cult of Taylor Swift or whatever. But no, like, Taylor Swift for some people is a religious icon. Yeah. She really is. And they have rituals, and they have, I will say this, it's you don't want to mix up those words with the idea that it's a cult. But it is the idea that they have a leader, they have rituals, and they have ways that they go about worshiping the message that she's providing. And a lot of the messages that she's providing are destructive. Right. And that doesn't mean that you can't listen to, Love Story and kind of bop around of like, oh, young teenage love. There's nothing in there immoral from a sexual standpoint. He's trying to marry her. He's trying to do these kind of things. And like, you can look at that and say like, there's nothing really wrong in that song. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you can take Cruel Summer and be like, no, this is a song glorifying destruction through unhealthy relationships and sex and manipulation. And you go, I would never want anyone to listen to this. Right. So with Taylor Swift, and I think that she has moved as she's gone through adulthood, you would look at Taylor Swift without the music, and you would see a woman that has gone from relationship to relationship to relationship that's clearly hurt her in her music. Like, you can listen to her talk about these things and see pain and see punishment, and then see songs like Bad Blood where it's like, and I want to get back and I want to get even. And you look at that and go, that's not a recipe for a happy life. I don't want someone to follow the path that she's pointing out. And like you said, it's not to attack the personhood of Taylor Swift. We want her to find Jesus and to find healing in those spaces. But I think as a believer, it'd be really hard to recommend her music to someone because the messaging in it is how to have a lot of pain in your life.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I'm gonna back you up on something that you said about almost being a cult following. So in the New York Times Person of the Year article, I'm just going to read a quote. A few months before I sit with Swift in New York on a summer night in Santa Clara, California, which has been temporarily renamed Swifty Clara in her honor, I am in a stadium with nearly 70,000 other people having a religious experience.
And that's how powerful music is. I mean, her old apartment when she was in New York for 2 months, people go lay flowers outside the old apartment. Mm-hmm. She's not there anymore. She hasn't been there in years. But that's where she wrote an album. So there was, in their mind, a holy work in their mind that took place there. So there is this idea of work. They're known as Swifties, right? Like, it's this idea that they have practices, and when people go to Taylor Swift events, for them it is a religious experience, for many of them. Now for some of them it's just to go, it's really cool, it's a great show. And at the same time, like, speaking of her music, like, one of the songs in her last tour, when you go and see the tour, they actually have a seance on stage. Now, it's not an actual seance, but they have, a coven of witches that come together, and they're hooded, and they have lamps, and there's a snake that appears. Like, there's a whole bunch of different things that take place. Now, the song itself is not about witchcraft.
Right.
But you have to ask yourself, if it is fitting to represent witches gathering and having a seance to this song, is this a song I should be listening to? So it's one of the things to think about when you listen to music is this glorifying on the narrow path, or is this something that is the wide path to destruction?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a great example of why I think that we started this podcast, and also for you and I in our own personal walk, it's like we've got to deconstruct culture. Mm-hmm. We've got to deconstruct it. And what you laid out is a perfect example of how the enemy is going to work. The enemy, and this is my hot take, and this is how I see it, and call me conspiratorial, I don't care, but I think the enemy is going to work through this girl who comes out that's very innocent, that's appealing to a lot of young women, appealed to me, appealed to a lot of men. All these innocent songs that any parent would be okay with their child listening to, and they listen to it for years and years and years. And as Taylor Swift's song, as she progressed through adulthood and was hurt, right? And a lot of times, look, it comes from kind of that seeking happiness, that selfish motivation stuff. You see that in how many people she's dated and hasn't been successful. There's something to be said there. Maybe we'll say it, maybe we won't.
Just soul tears.
Yeah.
It's just, dude, you're on with this, because you can look at her music. There was a season of time when she was really big, like with 1989. I dated a couple girls, and both of them would say that they would be best friends with Taylor Swift because they went through the same things in life. Like, it was the millennial stage, right? So they were born in the 90s, and it was this idea that, like, I grew up and we went through the same things together, and I so relate to her music. And you can see the destructive path in the sense that, like, started out innocent and hopeful, and as time has gone on, the music itself bears out pain and sadness over and over. Like, Reputation was the idea of, like, now I'm going against all my haters, now I'm going against, you know what I mean? It went from this innocence that you had with, I don't even remember the name of her first album, but like the one that Love Story's on, like Real Country Taylor.
Yeah,
and it slowly fades into more and more pain and more payback. And it's really sad because it's just the story of a broken person.
Right. And I mean, speaking of payback, and I think that this is, we've mentioned a few songs, and again, this is not for non-believers. Like, we just want you to know Jesus. Like, this is not like, please, like, this is not, we're speaking to believers.
Right.
The antithetical messaging in her songs is like the song Karma, for example. It's literally about inflicting karma on people who have done her wrong, and she's like this god of the world. And a lot of people who haven't died to themselves, that's how it's this other person's fault. It's their fault. It's never a reflection. How many people has she wronged, right? What if they were where she was, right? And it's the opposite of forgiveness. It's the opposite of grace. It's the opposite of dying to yourself. And it's through this messaging in a very appealing way. And like I said, because there's not the just outright cussing, there's not, the Eminem style lyrics, people go, oh, well, she's not that bad. It's okay to listen to. And it's like, I'm telling you, the enemy is not just going to come out in horns and it's not going to be like that.
Yeah,
right?
Sin never
subtle.
comes to your door looking like a vampire, right? Like, it always comes to your door dressed really nice. Like, it always comes in innocently. And I think for her, it might have started there. I mean, how many, like, Hannah Montana goes to Miley Cyrus, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that we see this in a very common way, and a lot of big artists that have come up in the last little bit. Like, if you think of, like, Olivia Rodrigo, like, her first big song is like Good For You, where it's an angry song about a breakup. And it's this idea that, like, there's a lot of hurt and resentment. And so it's very relatable because most people have gone through a tough breakup, and it starts more innocent, and then you just kind of see the pain amplify and amplify and amplify. And of course it's going to play well with the world because the world's in that broken place. And it's just, like you said, for believers to sit and say, man, is this something I want to invite into my life? Because for me, especially with music, knowing how spiritual it is, I want to invite into my life hope, healing, grace, goodness, love, and the music should reflect that because I am being filled with it, and it is affecting the environment around me.
Right. I mean, even breakup songs in general are sometimes, and a lot of our songs are breakup songs. And this is something, this is a little bit personal, but, I went through a divorce, and I went to a divorce class, and it was led at a church. And I went to this class, and there was people that had been in it for over a year. Mm-hmm. And every time they spoke, there was just so much bitterness and so much anger towards their spouse. There was no healing, there was no forgiveness, there was no grace, and it was so dark. It was just so dark. Now, granted, some of them married for 2 decades, lost so much, custody battles. I understand, right? I do.
Deep
okay, but breakup songs, man, that just invokes bitterness in your heart so much, and we just don't realize that. But man, are they appealing when you're going through it.
It's almost like what you mentioned when you need a ministering song of the Lord making a way. Mm-hmm. We talked about, like, Waymaker is the one that always comes to mind in this play, where it's like, we are a little bit more focusing on what he can do for me. But if you're in that place, you need the reminding of that you serve a big God, mm-hmm. and a God that is able to reach into your circumstances with resources you don't even know exist to help you. So you can feed into that kind of vein, or you can go down and the world will tell you to be angry, to be bitter, to get back at them, yeah. And it feels good temporarily, but it leads you down. It's like sugar. You feel good for like 5-10 minutes, and then you're going to have the hangover, the sugar hangover afterwards, and you're going to feel terrible. And it's really like, when you talk to someone and they're still really bitter and angry about their breakup, mm-hmm. they're not healed.
Right.
They'll tell you like, oh, I can't stand him or her so much now. And it's like, I'm so over it. It's like, no, if you were, it would be open-handed and peaceful. And, what you're listening to isn't helping you get there. Yeah.
I mean, as Christians, I think we want to get to that point of like wishing, truly in our heart, wishing the best for that person and having that forgiveness. And I just think that like, and obviously it's not just her, it's most artists, and I've been there, and those songs have appealed to me, but like I really think about it and I'm just like, if all your songs are about that, like you can just see the bitterness and you're carrying all that following with you to feel that bitterness. And the thing is that in a lot of country songs, for example, there's actually a self-reflectance. Like, man, I screwed up. I drank too much. I was an idiot. And now she's driving, and it's always like, there's always a line about like, I could see your taillights fading off in the distance. I think that's in every single country song. Yeah. But there's like a self-reflection at least. There's never one in these songs. It's always 100% the other person's fault. There's never, ever a breakup that's 100% the other person's fault. Maybe 99%. But we're all humans, we all fall short, and we all have to have love and grace, because that person, if they hurt us, if they did something wrong, there's a reason for it, and they need Christ, and they need healing, and we should wish for that to happen.
Yes, and the music that you choose during hard seasons of your life and joyous seasons of your life will impact how you deal with that season of life. Mm-hmm. So if you like that video, you can watch another one right here. And if you want to see the full podcast, you can click right here. And as always, 25% of all proceeds go to missions, and you can always check us out, disciples.us.